Welcome to Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. It's like coffee with an analyst, or it could be whiskey with an analyst reading a spreadsheet, linking crime events, identifying a series, and getting the latest scoop on association news and training. So please don't beat that analyst and join us as we define the law enforcement analysis profession one episode at a time.
Thank you for joining me. I hope many aspects of your life are progressing. My name is Jason Elder, and today our guest has 5 years of law enforcement analysis experience. He is currently a crime analyst at NYPD, but he comes to us from Trinidad and Tobago. He was an investigations officer with the Police Complaints Authority. He earned a certificate of crime analysis and prevention and analysis from John Jay College. Here to talk about, among other things, package thieves and what to do about them. Please welcome Nicolas Smith. Nicolas, how are we doing?
I'm fine today. And yourself?
I am doing very well. So thank you for joining me. I appreciate the time and looking forward to the perspective of your journey to NYPD. And we are following in the footsteps of Alexander Lynch and Deb Peel. So I'm fascinated to hear the crime analyst one position and how that's treating you. So we'll start from the beginning. How did you discover the law enforcement analysis profession?
Well, actually, it was on my way back into the United States to start back working. Initially, my law enforcement experience was with the Trinidad and Tobago Ministry of National Security, where I started there way back in 1994 as a rating with the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard. The Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard is an arm of the Ministry of National Security, and it is a military arm. It's not per se a policing arm. So it's in line with it's equated with the Navy in the US here. So I started my career in law enforcement there. The thing about it, in terms of law enforcement, there's a variation with the arm of the Coast Guard. It has a law enforcement entity rooted in the Ministry of National Security, the law, the act itself, where Coast Guard officers can intercept vessels, any vessels within the territorial waters of Trinidad and Tobago, and search them. If there's evidence or any grounds to hold them, bring them back to shore, and then do investigation with the civil police there. And if charges are to be laid, it is laid by the police. But the Coast Guard officers will have to go to court and give evidence. So that whole probable cause and the stop and the search must be done according to the law. So that's where Coast Guard gets their law enforcement badge then.
Okay. So is this mostly drug evidence that's being collected off the ships, or is it other contraband?
Yeah, drug, illicit contraband, immigration, human trafficking, arms as well. Because Trinidad and Tobago is just about 4 nautical miles off the coast of South American coast, Venezuela. Mm-hmm. On a clear day on the Western Peninsula, you can see, on the Southern Peninsula, you can see Venezuela. It's clear day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So then that sounds like with your work with the Coast Guard, was it a smooth transition then to becoming an investigative officer with the Police Complaint Authority?
Well, that was like, I joined the Trinidad and Tobago Police Complaints Authority, which again is governed by legislation. Mm-hmm. And that gives that authority the power to investigate police officers for several offenses, be it criminal, corruption, police corruption, and against the police in Trinidad and Tobago, their standing orders. So serious police misconduct according to their standing orders, the Police Complaints Authority can investigate matters that arises, say from the public, or the authority can do through audits, can look in and say, this is something that we need to investigate. Okay. So the investigative tools were wide in terms of data of the investigative authority in Trinidad and Tobago. But I started there in 2011. Mm-hmm. So in terms of my career in law enforcement, I was a active member of the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard up until 2002. 2002. And while in the Coast Guard, I was privileged to be in special unit, a unit that specializes in special operations. So that gave me the opportunity to train with even the Navy SEALs and other of the U.S. law enforcement, say DEA and other sections that would come and offer training. That inspired me to move on from the Coast Guard in 2002 and go into an intelligence arm within the Ministry of National Security. That arm dealt with covert operations as well as other assignments so delegated by the Minister of National Security. So in 2004, I decided that, look, in terms of my career, I was still bottom tier, entry level. Mm-hmm. I needed an education because I had just had a high school diploma in Trinidad and Tobago. And in order to be promoted to any position, I would need a degree. Something traumatic happened in my life. Well, I shouldn't say traumatic, but it's a fact of life. My father passed away in 2002.
Oh, sorry.
And I saw that I needed to do something. Because when I looked at, my father worked every day, grew both my sister and I up. And I saw my mother was relatively young. She was just like 48 when my father passed away. And I decided, look, this is what my father left for my mother. It's just for my mother, This is not going to happen to me. And my father always inspired us to get an education and work harder. So I started to look out. I heard about John Jay College and I applied and was successful in starting my degree there. I started doing my bachelor's in criminology, and one of my professors encouraged me to join the BA-MA program where you do both the bachelor's and master's at the same time. And I did that. I graduated in 2009 with my master's in criminal justice. And I went back to Trinidad and Tobago to my old job. But by that time, the government had changed and there was a little political rift in terms of that agency, be it doing covert operations. There were some allegations that was brought up against it. So that is when I applied for the job in the PCA. I was hired because of my experience in covert and intelligence investigations, but no criminal investigation background. I didn't have that. I learned it on the truck.
Okay.
So I had to learn how to investigate things from a criminal aspect, gathering evidence.
Yeah. So how did you like the covert aspect of it when you first started there?
Within the ministry, 2002, it was exhilarating. It was exhilarating. I had surveillance training with the French DST, the director of surveillance. They came down and they did courses with us. It was amazing how the information is used, how using the tradecraft they applied to acquire intelligence. It was fascinating. We had British intelligence officers training us. It was amazing. Just to get that tradecraft. Actually, you see things like dead letter boxes and all these things, how you would run your CI or agent, as the case may be. It's interchangeable in the US and the British, what they call their CIs. So it was an experience.
Are you able to share any stories regarding your time there?
The agency that I used to work for is now debunked. At the time I was in the agency, we had to sign an oath of secrecy. But seeing that the agency is now debunked and there was a political fiasco, I would be wary of sharing stories there. Yeah. All I can say is that what we did, it was in the interests of the nation as well as the Americas.
Yeah. When you're dealing with surveillance and developing the CIs and going undercover, was some of the training then involved in acting, like perfecting your acting skills?
You must. It was actually an operation. It was actually planned. You have a cover story. You had a cover officer that would go over the operations with you, so you know exactly. And most of the operations did not involve you being armed. Okay. You were in there because you were actually dealing with people who themselves are armed, but you don't want to walk in there with a gun, right? So because you would have to explain yourself.
Yeah. Well,
'Cause,
that's added pressure. So not only do you have to be a great actor, you're unarmed. You don't have anything to back you up there if
no,
you do get yourself into trouble.
your backup team has to come in and take you out, or
Yeah.
you have to get yourself out of that,
Yeah.
right?
So did you find the acting part of it? Did you find that easy, or is that something you really had to work on to hone your skills?
As long as you embrace your trade craft, it will be easy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you go over, you study your target, the environment. It would be easy.
Yeah.
It would be easy, no matter where you land yourself. And as long as you have a cover story and you stick to it, and you have the mission at heart, you will be successful and safe.
Nice. So you go, as you mentioned, you decided to go get your education. John Jay, was that online, or did you actually go to school in New York?
Yes, I went to school in New York.
Mm-hmm.
I applied for a student visa and invested all my savings to be here, to come to New York and study. It was not an easy experience. It was very expensive, but I paid my way, you know.
Now, how was that transition then coming into the States? Huge investment for you, certainly not wanting to fail, but also dealing with the culture and studying. As you look back now as your first couple of months there here in the States, what are some of the things you remember? Maybe one of some struggles that you had that you overcame?
You said it right there. You said, don't want to fail. I did not want to fail because I knew at that point in time, by then I was an adult. I was like 29 years old. Mm-hmm. So there's no room for failure in that aspect. Most people 29 work in the years that I worked is already, they have a house, they have a car, they're married, they got kids, and they're settled in terms, they know what they want to do in terms of the organization that or the field that they chose. With me, I just knew I'm a person like this. As long as I want something, I work towards it. And my father grew me up like that. Mm-hmm. I qualify myself. My father always told me, you want to be somewhere, qualify yourself and apply. So in terms of coming over here, making the investment, all I did was just numb myself to everything that was around me. I had a professor, one of my first professors was Professor Vincent Nicolosi. He was my English teacher, and he inspired me. It's like tough love. He reminded me of my father. The first few weeks, I remember writing the first essay. I got like a B plus. I said, wow, I can do this, write it. The second paper, I got a D. And he said, all right, come. The first paper, I just, what's your first assignment? I don't want to break you, but you have a lot of work into the English lab, to improve your writing. I will personally, look after your work. I spent 5 years at John Jay, 4.5 years or 5 years, and I never left the writing lab. I stayed with Professor Nicolosi throughout. My essays were top in terms of his tutelage, and he always inspired me in that way. He didn't break me at first, and he told me when he gave me the D, he said, listen, you got work to do. Go to that lab, and he said a lot of people wouldn't take it. When after I graduated, he said a lot of people would not have took it as you did. But inside, I knew I didn't want to fail. I knew I had to write properly in order to get good grades.
So did you, once you finished college, did you know what you wanted to do and then decide to move back? Or what was your decision process once you were about to graduate?
I always wanted to go back to my country and go back to the Ministry of National Security and push policy reform, push on an agenda to keep public safety at heart. Mm-hmm. But it's not easy getting into the public service or civil service where you have people there for years, people without degrees, people without that look on the outside of what criminal justice is. Because in terms of Trinidad and Tobago, yes, they may talk the lingo of criminal justice, but you can see how, if you look into the country, the way the ministry is set up, right? It's not criminal justice as we know, the police the courts and the prisons or corrections, as we call it up here, and that is the criminal justice system. The prison and police are attached to the Ministry of National Security. The courts is another section. So that communication, that transition for persons is not that smooth, you know, and that I always say that's something that, you know, in terms of reform, they have to look at to bring these three entities into one ministry and to have that flow resembling America. Because Trinidad has a British background. Okay. So a lot of the things that they have government-wise or constitutionally is more from the British aspect. Although we do a lot of interface with the US. It's like a little social confusion that we go through from time to time. And it takes people to really do that brainstorm and analysis and say, listen, let's write public policy different, you know, to our benefit. Okay. You know.
So is this where you then have the position there where you're more like internal affairs, investigating complaints against officers?
Yes. So in 2010, they passed a law that they needed to have serious police oversight in Trinidad and Tobago. The law basically gave the Police Complaints Authority, who is now run by a gentleman by the name of David West, my former boss, you know, that organization, as I said, invests police corruption, serious criminal complaints brought against officers, serious police misconduct, and so on. It also has a line where as long as there's mention of the police being involved, the Police Complaints Authority can investigate any person. So as long as the police has interaction with that person and there's an allegation brought about that, they can do it. So it's a wide ambit they have. So there I was, not knowing anything about criminal evidence, having to take statements from people that is evidential and not knowing what to do. I'm writing like if I'm still an intelligence officer, you know, just the facts and whatnot. And I had a supervisor by the name of Alan Miguel. He's a lawyer. He now works for the National Security Policy Office in Trinidad and Tobago. Now he moved on. So he took me, he was a former police officer, and he took me and he said, this is how you write a statement. You know, he made me, again, I always meet people like that. I always appreciate them, you know, always appreciate them. You know, that tough love, you know, they make you spell out what you do in front of people, you know, and then show you and mold you the right way. You know, that's something that's how I grew up. It's something that I appreciate. I don't know how younger people are, you know, being called in front of the room to read your work. But Alan Miguel played an integral part in getting me, you know, where I'm at in terms of investigations. And it was not difficult because of my education with ATWJE, you know. It was easy, you know, that those classes with criminal law and constitutional law, I really took them seriously and was able to apply aspects of policing that are the courses that I did in ATWJE and apply at home. It wasn't difficult, you know.
So what were some of the changes? Because certainly, you know, every industry has a certain way that they want folks to write. And so you had mentioned that you were writing more like an intelligence report, but then he sat you down and said, this is what you needed to do. What were some of the tips or some techniques that he was suggesting that you do when you're writing these reports that are more investigative in nature?
Well, his tutelage started with the statement. A statement is actually evidential. It's a sworn officer taking a statement from a person, right? It could be a person, a suspect, a witness, right? Well, in the latter case, it would be a suspect, but more so witnesses. And that has to form and be written in with rules, right? Judges' rules, right? That the courts would recognize. So certain things must be mentioned, the date, the time. In terms of the witness, if it's a witness, they must be able to recall that day. They must say something if it was their daughter's birthday or the rain fell heavily that day. You must bring these things into the statement. And then whatever they're describing, they must be able to say, there must be key statements that you inspire the person to say, was there anything in your way? Did you have a clear line of sight? How was the lighting on that day? So, and then they describe what they saw or what you as the investigator is hoping they add to your case, right? That to build your case against the perpetrators or the alleged defaulters or perpetrators, as the case may be. You have to write these things in a statement, and it must be concise and clear. And it must go with the judge's rules or the law, as the courts recognize it in terms of a statement. And it's actual evidence. So that's like an it's a statement in Trinidad and Tobago is actually an investigative tool used, witness statements. It was one of the major things, you know.
Mm-hmm. Besides the writing, are there any other aspects of the job that you feel that you struggled with in the beginning, but pretty much mastered by the time you're finished 4 or 5 years in?
I wouldn't say. I was always keen. I am accustomed with the outdoors. A lot of investigators get bogged down into the office, right? Because they have a lot of paperwork to do. I found ways to do my paperwork, right? It's getting out there and really looking at to see what happened. Most investigations, I believe, is a freeze frame. It's a picture. It's a still picture that you take a moment in time or a couple of still pictures. And you as the investigator, when you see that, you look and then you pull out, why is this like this? Why is that like that? And you ask yourself questions. And that gives your line of inquiry. So that for me was easy because I always like to be outside, you know, and knowing the country or knowing the environment was helpful, you know. So it wasn't that hard for me. Lastly, just bringing all of that back in terms of making your notes, bringing it back to the office and putting it on paper. And then analyzing what you put on paper, if they are actually findings that's evidential to proving the allegations made against the person. That's it. That was it. In terms of working there for 6 years.
Okay. And you started when they were just really creating this concept. You talked about laws changing in 2010. So when you're coming on board and you're doing it for 6 years, do you think that you really saw a lot of change during that time in terms of corruption and how it was treated with the unit?
I wouldn't say there was a lot of changes, but the PCA gets into it. They try their best. One of the things that I was a little frustrated by and they had an act, they had a legislation. The legislation is much more pointed than, say, the CCRB in New York, Civilian Complaints Review Board in New York. The legislation just stopped short of arresting, just having the powers of arrest, right? In both cases. But in terms of investigation, the PCA could investigate criminally. So they had powers of search and seizure, working with other entities in law enforcement, you know, asking for evidence in a timely fashion, and it must be produced. Otherwise, the person could be taken before the courts. So, but as I said, what was frustrating is that they did not operationalize the act in terms of, do we have a procedure for search? Do we have a procedure to work with this entity? Do we have a memorandum of understanding with certain entities? You know, that's where it stops short, and that's where policy is important. And I'm a stickler for policy. And I hope one day I'll be able to work in an entity where I, you know, is at the wheel of policy, you know, policy evaluation or policy creation, you know.
All right. So let's move on then, getting into you becoming a crime analyst with NYPD. So what goes into that decision? You're back home, you've been doing this for 6 years, and an opportunity comes up with you moving to NYPD, one of the biggest cities in the world, to become an analyst.
Well, that starts with my wife, Nicolas Smith. She's a sworn officer with the NYPD.
Oh, okay.
She allowed me to pursue my dreams and go back home, leave New York in 2011 and go back to Trinidad and Tobago, Actually the contracts at the PCA is 3 years. So the first 3 years, she asked me, "You coming back home?" I said, "No, I want to stay because I want to get promoted.
Mm-hmm.
I must get promoted."
Mm-hmm.
So I got promoted at the end of the first 3 year contract. So I had a small team, and I have investigators that I supervise. So I decided, listen, I can't stay away from my wife for so long. I don't have all that leg room. So in 2017, the end of my contract, I came back up. So it's like, what am I going to do? Right?
Mm-hmm.
What am I going to do? So my wife joined the department in 2016, right? And I'm back here in 2017, not knowing what to do, having a master's degree, all my law enforcement experience is more or less in Trinidad actual.
Mm-hmm.
It's in Trinidad and Tobago. So she was the one that saw this opening on Indeed for a crime analyst for the NYPD. There was no chance of me ever becoming a sworn officer because I already aged out,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you have to be 35 to write the exam. You could come on the job after, but you must have written the exam at 35. So I said, all right, let me apply, but I'm not sure if I'm going to get this job. But I really hope I do. So I applied, and I left to go to Trinidad. I was actually an electrical mechanic doing electrical work
Mm-hmm.
for a company called Control Spec, run by a gentleman called Kenneth Tesh. Kenneth Tesh, again, another guy that showed me tough love because I didn't know anything in terms of electrical work, and he gave me that break until I worked my way up to a foreman in his company. So when I came back, he took me back. So I'm there doing a job, and I get this call for an interview to come into the NYPD for an interview. So I'm elated because I'm actually going to 1PP, One Police Plaza.
Yeah.
I always wanted to walk into that building. So I said, even though I don't get this job, I'm going to get to be in that building. I hope I pick up some pebble or some stone and put it in my pocket when I'm leaving. So I went to the interview, and I met Deborah Peel and a female lieutenant for the interview. And Deborah, I call her Deborah, she asked me, "What do you know about crime analysis?" And again, I had to go back to the PCA, which has a part of the legislation where they have to account for their annual activities. And I worked on that project, mostly Excel, putting the complaints together, having the variables, and just making a couple of tables in terms of pivot tables and percentages, and submitting that, doing the write-up and submitting that. I did it for more or less 5 of the 6 years I was there. So I sold myself as that at that interview. I didn't think it was much in terms of, when I read what an analyst does, a crime analyst does, the different aspects of the crime analyst field. I didn't think it was much, but 45 minutes of leaving 1PP, feeling proud that I was able to go up to the 11th floor at 1PP. I got an email with a job offer.
Nice.
And I immediately replied yes. And I
start tomorrow.
I started. It was the interview was in the end of November, I believe. And I started the 17th of December, 2017.
Hey, this is Dawn Reeby. I'm here with Jason Elder on Analyst Talk, and I want to share with you that there is a new book coming out for supervisors called Building a Crime Analysis Legacy. This is a law enforcement supervisor's roadmap to building long-lasting, high-quality analytical capacity. August 10th is the day that it comes out. Don't miss out. Tools, strategies, everything you need to build quality analytics is in this book. So be sure to get your copy on August 10th.
Hey, this is Freddy Croft, Lieutenant with HPD. My public service announcement is to encourage people to get a T model of skill acquisition. Learn a broad set of skills across many different things, and then find one that interests you and dive deep into that. Learn and become a subject matter expert in it. Doing that will allow you to be extremely successful in your career.
Hi, my name is Brian Napolitano, and I'm here to talk about name badges. When you're attending a training or a conference, please make sure your name badge is at an appropriate height and is legible enough so that strangers won't be staring where they shouldn't, just so they can figure out your name. Thank you for listening.
So with the job of crime analyst, you have the data that you talked about that you had become accustomed to when you were there in Trinidad and Tobago. And what other aspects of the job when you first started did you find maybe particularly challenging for you that you had to overcome?
It was the technology, the in-depth, the way how things were coming at you and the vast amount of data. Mm-hmm. And actually, in the Nypd, after we did our first couple of weeks in the academy, they sent us back out. Initially, I didn't go to a precinct right away because I wasn't placed in one right away. I worked for 2 weeks under Deborah at 1PP. Mm-hmm. But after coming to the precinct, you were not really sure about what to give, what role you play in terms of crime prevention. And that's the whole beauty of probably how it was set up. It was set up, in a way that not all the analysts were in the same place, and it still is that way. Mm-hmm. Some analysts were together, some analysts were out in the field, working, finding their way. I appreciated that. Mm-hmm. I appreciated that concept because what Deborah allowed us to do was to grow on our own and communicate what we were learning, mm-hmm. by way of reports. She didn't give us, okay, this is what you all do. She made our minds grow. It's a pity that she's not with us because I really believe that how her view on things, we would be, much more elite than we are now. Although we are elite, don't get me wrong, we do our work. If the commanding officers ask us for things, we produce, Mm-hmm. But that whole thing, amount of information and what to give your sergeants, what to give your lieutenants, mm-hmm. what to give the CO. This is the commanding officer of the precinct,
With the other side of the coin there with that question. So there was that aspect that you kind of had to overcome, but given your experience and your personality, was there aspects to the job you were just really comfortable with and picked up really easy?
Yes. The being part of the military before and working in that setting was easy. I had a great sergeant. He moved on now to another branch, still a sergeant, but he was great. Ramberto Rios was my sergeant. He really worked with me. We were like partners, I would say, in terms of, because he was interested in the analytical part of it, as well as him doing the administrative part and being a police officer at the same time, being a supervisor. He was always open to my ideas, always working with me with developing reports. So with him, I found my niche in terms of analyzing the crime for the majors, the 7 majors, putting out reports in a way that's digestible for deployment, for the CO to use for deployment, and also picking up on cluster analysis in terms of vehicle crime, because we have at the precinct I work with, actually I was just doing that report, the vehicle crime report, where we look at the bigger picture and start through our PD codes, our internal PD codes, start pulling the PD codes that speaks to vehicle crime. Mm-hmm. Right. So we would use a number of crimes, use the PD codes to pull it, and then we hone in on them on a map and then do these reports. So it gives us an idea of what's going on in terms of vehicle crime. When we do that, we're able to see what's the condition in terms of vehicle crimes, because at times we get things like window break, batteries being taken from scooters, catalytic converters. And these things are not in PD codes. There's no PD code for a Revel battery, but within the narrative, is that's where we pull it out. So we use our keyword search, pull these things out, makes layers, and then we tell the commanding officer or the lieutenant responsible for deployment, this is what's going on here, and it's here. Probably it's on the border with another precinct, so that we could say, listen, we're sharing information. You all are getting hit with rebel batteries. We're getting hit as well in this area. So that's what it came to, and it came with working with a sergeant that is, comfortable, working together, giving you a chance to do your analysis as a civilian, Yeah, so that was a good thing. I had a great sergeant.
All right. So I think this brings us to your analyst badge story then. And for those that may be new to the show, the analyst badge story is the career-defining case or project that an analyst works on. And for you, as you're looking at all this data and identifying big picture opportunities for prevention, you hone in on the idea of package thieves. And this is certainly something that every municipality in America, I believe, is struggling with in one form or fashion, because there's so much more packages being delivered straight to the houses now, and given opportunities for what they call porch pirates, people to steal the packages before the recipient can even bring them into their residence. So let's start from the beginning, identifying the issue and some potential solutions for this phenomenon.
Well, coming up with the issue again, I do it every week, at the precinct. But the whole idea to frame it, to make it make sense in terms of a project, came from me going back to John Jay to get some more training in terms of the academia in crime analysis. So John Jay offers an advanced certificate in crime analysis and crime prevention. So I enrolled in it. It's 6 courses, I believe, that you would take. But it opened my eyes to environmental criminology and going back to the work of rational theories like rational choice, crime pattern theory, and novelties or work by individuals in terms of crime prevention. Things that many people are not sold on, at first, and if you're doing criminology, especially like rational choice, they just think that they're just simple. But it gave me another look into the way how these theories could be used for crime prevention. The problem-oriented policing came into view. So now looking at the great Herman Goldstein and his work and seeing that there's a whole entity out there, there's a whole body of work, and I'm sitting in the NYPD with all this data. I do a package theft report every week. Let's see if I can make one for New York City. So that prompted me to do the project. But in terms of the data, there wasn't much to go on because, as you said, most of the package theft research was done in the suburban setting, and they refer to them as porch pirates. But here in New York City, it's something different. Yes, there are single unit houses and whatnot. People have porches in the city. Yes, there's some houses like that. But the majority of incidents were in residential apartment buildings, not public housing or large apartment buildings that's, has a staff, a janitorial staff, that has a doorman and all of these things. It's more so in 5 or 6 story buildings. So the data speaks to that. So I decided to go that way and do problem-oriented policing guide for package theft in the city.
Oh. And it sounds like what you described there was a lack of a suitable guardian. You're getting to a situation where if they had a bellhop, or if they had, I shouldn't say bellhop, but if they had staff members on site there at the facility, not really as much of an issue with these package thieves. But when you go to scenarios where there's not anybody there on staff and the packages are just left alone, this is the environment where you're seeing the most problems.
Exactly. So, the the theoretical framework lies with the routine activities theory, which allows the foundation for us to just think in terms of package theft. The motivated offender, while the offender is engaging in his everyday activities, will encounter a vulnerable target, right? Also, the rational choice theory provides for like the decision-making process of a highly motivated offender, where he or she, contemplates the benefits and potential risk of taking that package, right? All in the urban setting. And also the Branton Holmes, their theory of crime pattern theory, where there's this travel between both offenders and victims, right? But in this case, it's more or less the offender and the victim or the target being the package. So just movement. So in terms of GIS, my GIS training, and crime mapping, which I got from John Jay, that ArcGIS foundation from John Jay, it allowed me now to look at, when I collected my complaints in terms of package theft, looking at my PD codes, because we have internal PD codes for packages in terms of grand larceny and petty larceny. We have PD codes at the NYPD for inside a building, unattended package, inside a building, unattended package, outside a building. Grand larceny is the difference between a grand larceny and a petty larceny is the cost. Grand larceny is over $1,000. The cost of the property, they would consider a grand larceny. But we also have burglaries where burglars, right? Burglary perps would target packages, right? Which brings me to, in terms of how I analyze the vulnerable areas of the building, and that fits into the environmental criminology aspect, where the packages are left or kept, and it would be in lobbies. So in the suburban setting, you would have what we call porch pirates, but I'm hoping that I'll be able to coin a phrase for the urban setting that would deal with something with lobbies,
Yeah.
That's where we have the incidents, where, there's the front door. As you said, there's no capable guardian. The front doors are sometimes left unlocked and it's starting. Poor lighting, or even in the lobbies where they leave the packages, people coming out, they can't see if somebody is hiding behind it. So in terms of the problem-oriented policing guide, I had to develop a crime script, as to how packages, how the perpetrators, right, in terms of their journey to where packages are kept, how they steal it. And that's also important in terms of selling it to the department or anyone who's interested in the project, enhancing the project. I have to show you how these things occur, in terms of the crime script, which is another theoretical framework I use to develop that in my presentation, how the individual will case the area, what they would do when they take it, how they would make good their escape, and on and on, all these things. And where I got that from, again, is from the data, because the officers in writing their narratives would bring these things out. Also, as an analyst, you can't be afraid, especially at the precinct level, you can't be afraid to ask officers certain things, or in terms of our access to ECMS and video, look at video or ask detectives what's the storyline, So that's how I was able to develop the crime script. And the crime mapping shows, and I would say at face value, the crime pattern theory, because most of my perpetrators, when I study the perpetrators, they have drug abuse problem. Most of their backgrounds, their pattern burglars, right? Or they've been arrested for petty larcenies, shoplifting and whatnot because of their habit. And the analysis shows I had to home in my analysis to my precinct, which is the 90th precinct in Williamsburg. So study the area, the demographics, the layout of the building, which I got from city data, and pull them in to my GIS analysis. I also use census data to show the population as well. And I was able to show that route, in terms of a diagram of how a perpetrator, where he lives, it isn't package theft yet. It's really, when you do cluster analysis, there isn't much activity where most of them live, which is primarily in public housing. But as you go out into the residential apartments, you see, and also with the mix of drug, people who are arrested or where police make stops for selling narcotics, you see along that route where the perpetrator makes that trip to get drugs, where the concentration of package theft occurs in the precinct. So the analysis shows crime pattern theory in effect. I have a diagram in terms of my presentation that I was able to put on paper.
You talked about the journey of this crime. The lobby, we can't call them lobbyists, but
we can't.
Going into the lobby and stealing the package. I'm just thinking rationally in terms of a thief. He or she has no idea what's in that package normally, right? So you have no idea what you just got your hands on in terms of value, but you do know that you want to score, right? You want to then get to the drugs, and you talked about the distance between your thefts and your open drug markets. And so I would think the first thing you would go to is the pawn shops, right? Because they're the ones that are going to give you the money if you want that quick turnaround, knowing that you're not going to know what you have out of your package until you get to a spot where you can open it and see what you just got.
Yeah.
So I would imagine then too, it's the proximity to the pawn shops in this as another location factor as this you walk through step by step to this journey.
Yeah, definitely pawn shops would be looked upon in terms of that. So in terms of a recommendation, reverse buys, visits by the special operations lieutenant, the pawn shops, all these are part of departmental procedure in terms of property crime. We do that, from time to time. So that's why a pub project or a pub guide for analysts, analysts wishing to do these things and understand departmental procedures in terms of crime prevention or investigations are very important. You must, in terms of your solutions, right? You must be able to marry wherever you work at into your recommendations. So pawn shop visits and enforcements are part of the solutions, right? But in terms of selling it, I had to do these diagrams and these maps to show that, look, you have a problem. And there are solutions that are not always hard and fast policing solutions, where you say, okay, because you identified there's a drug nexus to your package theft, we should go and do counter narcotics operation all the time. It's much more than that. My solutions would marry into locks. It would marry into reaching out to landlords, reaching out to tenants, the public education, redesigning lobbies, which might be expensive, but it could add employment, reaching out to the schools, having competitions, poster competitions, or making signage that, children could put up and appeal to perpetrators that package theft is wrong. These things come in, and where the NYPD could play an important role in crime prevention. Instead of just we're doing reverse buys or looking to be on the corner, right? Even offering alternatives to incarceration or prosecution, because there was one perpetrator that was always hitting us in the 90s. I wouldn't call his name, of course, but I asked about it. I say last year, and I said he's in the rehab. It was offered to him by the judge, and I haven't heard from him yet. I haven't heard from him, and he lives where most of the perpetrators live in one area of the precinct. I wish this interview I could have put up the slide to show what the data speaks to, because it's real.
Yeah. Are we able to publish this information that you sent, your presentation? Are we able to publish this?
I would have to seek departmental approval, but I'm trying to sell it through the department.
Okay.
I'm trying to see. Right now, it's on the CO's desk because I work for the CO. It's his information. It's his data. So I want to give him a chance to look at it, add any, add-ons or anything like that, and then probably send it out to my department where all the analysts come under, which is the Chief of Crime Control Strategies. I want to give it to the chief as yet and go over my CO's head.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hey, if we do get approval by the time we publish this, we'll definitely put in a link into the show notes so you can get more information on this presentation that Nicolas is referring to. So I guess, so there's obviously some things you recommended in terms of this, whether it be education for bringing to their attention the impact of package theft, improving the lobbies, and certainly I know the sender of the packages, right? The Amazons of the world, right? They have scenarios where sometimes it requires a signature or, they've put it in certain situations where they just can't deliver anymore to certain locations because there's too much theft there. There's too much reporting of theft that they're not going to just leave the package in the lobby anymore. And so it's definitely multifaceted and definitely something that will continue as long as, number one, the packages are just going to be left there and unattended. And number two, they can get value for whatever they're stealing.
Yeah. And most of the solution or the responses come from situational crime prevention, that theory, by way of, increasing the perceived effort by the perpetrator to get the package, increasing perceived risks, reducing the rewards, and removing excuses, those headlines in situational crime prevention. And because of the crime script, we're able to get these solutions out. So definitely Amazon, FedEx, things like package lockers in vulnerable locations. If they want to, we could talk, everybody, bring in the stakeholders and talk about putting it in. Or even when we redesign lobbies, if landlords want to do it, or if there's an incentive by, let's say, representatives, political representatives, or even the banks who might want to assist, in terms of building up the environment or the neighborhood, design these lobbies with package lockers in them, where the tenants could use them, make it affordable. Things like doors. I've been doing some research with people that make security doors right in Brooklyn, with cameras. That's, it's more for security in terms of their explosive proof, bulletproof, and all these things. People could get out there and work, to see if you could have an incentive for landlords to buy or design one that is affordable, to prevent these things in terms of crime prevention. So that's there. Amazon and FedEx definitely. I'd really love to sit and talk to them and see if they would be interested in,
Yeah, I'm almost, I guess it's probably more difficult than what I'm thinking it would be, but I'm actually surprised there isn't like some kind of service out there that will take your FedEx package and then deliver it whenever you want it delivered. Because FedEx is not going to deliver it at a certain time, right? It's going to deliver whenever it makes it to your location, right? But if you wanted to make sure that you were home when the package arrived, then you can have that service say, okay, you're going to get my package and then I want it delivered at 8 p.m. But it's all about convenience, right? Because you could have it sent to somewhere where it's a locker, like it's a P.O. box somewhere, like at the FedEx store. You could go there, but then you got to go there out of work, find the FedEx store when they're open, get it, and then bring it home. And that's super inconvenient. Yeah. So, but something where they're actually still delivering it to your home, but it's at the time that you want it, there might be something to that.
Yeah, but there are other solutions where actually the landlord and the tenants could work or make an available space. Mm-hmm. And that's for our crime prevention officers or officers to get in there and have that community relation, get in there and say, look, we're going to educate you. We're going to train you in terms of what's the going rate in order to secure your packages. That is part of some of the solutions as well.
Yeah, there's definitely something to that. You talked about apartment supervisors. Somebody needs to be around during the day. That's what it comes down to. It almost comes down to.
Like the summertime, like now, you see, it's busy. People, and this is the thing that the data speaks to. The data speaks to, I analyze the months. And September, August, September, where kids are going back to school, and there's this influx of buying stuff for school. That's where we get hit a lot. So even now in the summer where kids are home, you can, as I said, working with the community, putting all those ideas there, just have kids just working or just doing something in the building, or even an elderly person just doing their duty. Some people would take up the offer, some might not, but it's just different solutions.
It makes me think of, campsites have that, right? Where they'll have a person on a campsite that's there camping, but they are the person that's responsible for any issues at that campsite during that time. And people that are camping there can sign up to be that person. And so in a way, it's almost that model there where you're trying to find someone or a group of people on a rotating schedule to be available there. And certainly takes some coordination, but if it was easy, everybody would be doing it, right?
Yep. And the whole thing about a pop guide, you can make it for any crime, because I'm also interested in another project in terms of violence. I know a lot of people comes into the job, they're always interested in gangs and guns, and especially gun violence now. But I came about in New York, we have a problem with certain gangs that are rivals because of drill music, drill rap that originated in Chicago. I did some research in terms of that, and I in the initial stages of identifying the groups, right? Because the groups go under two banners. I don't want to call names, but they're affiliated to older gangs, right? That's identifiable. But because of our record keeping, how we identify gang members, which goes to federal guidelines and whatnot, they do not fit the mold of a gang member, but they still go under the umbrella. So some of them, we can't find them in the system. And I had to do some research. I read some work by Forrest Stewart. I think he's out of the University of Chicago, I believe. But anyway, Forrest Stewart wrote The Ballad of the Bullet. His research helped me to understand drill rap, so much so that I saw he spoke about the rappers in Chicago early, the corner boys, he called them in his book, and how they're fascinated when you look into it. The problem, yes, everybody will talk about violence, but when you dig deeper into the music, into the way or what these individuals want, the notoriety, right? The whole thing about social media pops up, right? And you see now where there's this underworld economy that's driving this aspect. So again, if you look at it from a problem-oriented viewpoint, you can make, using data, you can make crime prevention strategies out of that. And it deals with alternatives, because Forrest Stewart didn't say, okay, we need to have more police on the street, more gun suppression units. Stop and first, he spoke again of alternative. And the whole thing is understanding your environment, understanding your problem, right, that exists in your environment as an analyst, and put forth, the data, of course. And if the department allows you crime prevention strategies, that's meaningful, and you can operationalize within your department because it's investigative tools or policy,
Yeah. I was trying to think of the word when you talk about folks that maybe not violent, don't have a lot of arrests, but they seem to always be there when stuff's going down. And I think the word that I'm thinking of, I just Googled it real quick, is crime facilitators.
Yes.
So these are folks that are helping the situation, but aren't necessarily the folks committing the crime. They're just helping the act of the crime be completed.
Yeah, well, Forrest outlined in terms of drill rap and the violence. He outlined the key players. He outlined the people who are on the street, how they operate. The rapper, it's himself. Because most of the time, the rapper is not the violent one. It's his buddy or his buddies, the ones that go around with him. Normally, they're the ones that carry the gun. And they're sometimes not in the picture at all. They would do the shooting and you wouldn't even know. Then there's other people like who do the videos. They're those that make the beats. Because Forrest George spoke of the people that make the beats itself and put it out into the web. They're not even from this country. They never even met a real rapper, but they just have the mechanisms to do so. Even the people that have the studios, to just have the money to have the recording studio. And these rappers pay money to come in and record. And sometimes it's their last dollar they have. And it's an industry that some people are profiting from and some people are paying with their lives. So it's very important for us to understand where we are at, because it's a problem that we've been having in New York City. The new mayor, Eric Adams, he mentioned it a couple months ago. He spoke about drill rap. I even spoke to David Kennedy. He's at ATWJE, very famous researcher in terms of the Boston Ceasefire Project, that he was instrumental and was successful. Another pop project. I spoke to him and he gave me some pointers as to start, my work, and encouraged me. He gave me the blessings. He said, Nicolas, this is a great avenue you want to go down, but it would take, a lot of research. It's just putting it together. That's one thing. It's how to put it together, because I myself, I don't go out on the street, I don't go out on the streets, just getting the blessings. Again, I may just have to pull data, analyze, and just sell it. And that's how it is working at the precinct level. Yeah. You have your ideas, but you have to sell it from inside the precinct, and then it goes out. You just can't send your work all over the place just like that. People don't have time for that,
Well, you told me that your ultimate goal is to influence policy, right? And to do that, you have to sell ideas.
Definitely.
Right. Very good. Well, I look forward to seeing your name on pop guides in the future. And certainly a very interesting story, Nicolas. Thank you for sharing your insight and your story with us. I'm going to wrap up the show now with words to the world. And this is where I give the guest the last word. You can promote any idea that you wish, Nicolas. What are your words to the world?
I would really like to see individuals coming into law enforcement and really dedicating their time to service. I look back on myself as someone in law enforcement. I've never been a sworn police officer. I may have wanted to be. I aged out when the opportunity really arose. But what I see is a lot of people coming into law enforcement, or even people influencing public safety, that are not keeping in line safety and service to the people. It's being driven by a lot of ideologies, be it wherever it is. Andrew Carmen at ATWJE spoke of that ideology. One of in terms of how society sees itself. And police, law enforcement officers must always maintain independence. I want to see that. And that would bring out service. Because look at me, I'm 49, approaching 50, One of the things I always do is get up in the morning and go to work. I do my little. I can't arrest anyone. I can't knock on the door and tell my chief that, sir, this is a good idea. I think we should, push for this. We should do the deployment. But just getting up in the morning, doing that service, coming in, doing my reports is my little part. But there are people who have the opportunity to make changes for public safety. And I implore these people to act on the independence of your institution and your office for the greater good. That's my word to the world.
Absolutely. Very good. Well, I hate to say this because I have one tagline that I always say, but it really doesn't fit with you. I say, well, I leave every guest with you've given me just enough to talk bad about you later. But thank you, Nicolas, so much. Appreciate your time, and you be safe.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.